So we're live here, Buxton.
1 minute to go, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to the June 27th regular council meeting. Members of the public have been provided with the following methods to watch and or participate in this open meeting. Attending person at the Township Hall has watched the live stream by accessing the meeting on the Township's YouTube page. Attend electronically to observe the meeting or to speak to an item on the agenda. To attend electronically, members of the public must register with the Clerk's Division in advance. And finally, submit written comments to the Clerk's Division in advance of the meeting. The correspondence have been provided to the Mayor and Council prior to the meeting and will form part of the public record. I'd now like to call the meeting to order and can I have approval of the agenda, please?
By myself, Secretary Councilor Gillespie, that Council adopt the June 27, 2022 regular council agenda as presented.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. I'd now like to do the Indigenous territory acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and is now the Inuit people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. I'd now like to pause as we reflect on this and the bounty and the growth that the Indigenous people provide for us all. Remember what happened in the past, what we can learn today, so that we can move forward together. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, there's no presentations or delegations. Consent agenda, committee of the whole reports. So, we are now looking for the adoption of the carried resolutions from the June 13th, 2022 committee of the whole meeting. Councilor Gillespie, you do not have to read it in its entirety.
By myself, seconded by Councillor Osner, that Council adopt the following recommendation as listed in 8.11 through A through N on the agenda as presented by the committee of whole, dated April the 11th, 2022.
That should be June the 11th?
Yes.
June 13th, I'm sorry.
Okay. A, report number PIN 2020-22, creation of the new discretionary reserve fund. B, report number PD 24-2022, approval of the development agreement for 2194 Dumfries Road, files number B0521 and B0621. C, report number BD 25-2022, draft plan of condominium through Riverstone Limited, Northumberland Street and Greenfield Road, file number 30, CDM 21305. D, report number REC 12-2022, Leisure Services Master Plan. E, report number REC 14-2022, Forest Food Forest Garden. G, report number REC 17/2022, Eric Centennial's request to sell alcohol at home games. H, report number REC 19/2022, batting cage rehabilitation, Victoria Park. I, report number PW 04/2022, oversized load permit agreement. J, report number PW 06/2022, reorder 2024 purchase of tandem axle truck. K, report number CLK 18/2022, proposed amendments to the 2022 council meeting schedule. L, report number CLK 2022, noise bylaw exemption request, improbable Valentine TV series filming at 3089 Greenfield Road Air. M, report number FD 07/2022, fire department incident response summary, May 2022. N, report number CAO 23/2022, consideration of township delegations, Association of Municipalities of Ontario 2022 conference.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next we have council approval of the minutes for May 16th, 2022. Councilor Austin?
Yes, moved by myself, second by Councilor Rowland, that council approved the following minutes. Regular council meeting minutes dated May 16th, 2022.
All those in favor? Carrie, thank you. So I think just put touch with you. Next is the resolution 9.1. About more homes for everyone else. Any questions or comments on this? Dr. Rowland.
Madam Mayor, my comments are through you, CAO. Quite a few disturbing things in that report about the 109. I guess the biggest question we have is how we prepare financially for the changes that are coming and what do we have to do in terms of taxes to address the staffing required.
So, Councilor Rowland, as staff has identified, there are a number of factors that dictate how quickly an application can be processed, brought forward to public meetings, follow up, reports to council in terms of decisions. But some of these inputs are outside of the control of the municipality. I think what it's going to mean is similar to what is in place in the building division, the Ontario building. Once again, there are hard and fast timelines. And if we approach one of those deadlines and the work is not available to us, and it's outside our control, then two paths exist. One would be to have the owner submit a letter acknowledging that the deadline is approaching and that they understand that there are matters outside our control and that they would not seek the recovery of funds. And if they don't, then a report is brought forward to council saying the application is premature because information is not available and we're required to make a decision within a certain prescribed date. And so then council can make a decision whether to deny the application as being premature, at which time they would have to start their process all over again if they wish to pursue the development application. That's why staff has identified in the report that we actually think this would frustrate the process more than assist it. I think the intentions were good in terms of trying to understand that we can collectively improve the development process. However, to single out municipalities and penalize them financially for some matters which are outside their control, I think is going to have exact opposite effect.
So I guess the question that I have is, what is our potential exposure financially? But I guess we really don't know what's going to happen.
So we don't know. And I know that there is a wide range of discussions underway right now across Ontario, because it's not, this provision isn't unique to North Dunford, so it apply to all municipalities, large or small, urban or rural. And there may have to be adjustments made to our fee bylaw as part of a presentation to council later this fall. As I said, I hope the discussions with the government, I know AMO is championing these discussions. I'm hopeful that we'll see a retooling by the province and an adjustment made to recognize that timelines that they forward, constraints that they have identified are penalizing rather than constructive in nature, and perhaps there'll be appropriate adjustment.
Councillor McCurry.
Question for CAO through the mayor. I'm wondering practically how this would work. Let's say you have a situation where an applicant gives you some information, you find a deficiency. They don't follow up and answer our questions or provide us with better input. So we decide we have to deny the application. What recourse then does the applicant have? Could they at that point take it to the Ontario Land Tribunal and dispute that we've turned them down?
So they wouldn't be able to dispute that we turned them down because the decision is the decision. However, they do have on any decision, the owner would have the ability to appeal the matter, have it referred to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If the basis of the decision, council is to turn it down because it's premature, because key pieces of information haven't been properly addressed, then that would be part of the argument before the board, is that council did not have a full picture of the nature of the application and the issues. As long as we can demonstrate that they've been documented and submitted to the owner to respond to, it does weaken their argument for referral to the board. As I said, I don't think this is the best way of dealing with matters, but I think you are going to see that happen from time to time, just because municipalities are having to now work within arbitrary time periods, and we can't control the two-way flow of information and work being undertaken by a third party, or of equal importance, comments coming from agencies outside of the corporation. And there are going to be times when key information is required from the Ministry of Transportation or the region or the Grand River Conservation Authority. And to make a proper decision, council is going to want that information to properly assess the merits of the application.
An example I'm thinking of is what if a drainage plan had been submitted and the township determined that it was inadequate and we ended up rejecting the application? Could the applicant then go to the Ontario Land Tribunal and argue that we should have accepted it, that their information was adequate? The Ontario Land Tribunal going to start making judgments on drainage plans, that type of thing?
So the Ontario Land Tribunal will not deal with a specific item like that. Our decision would have been, let's just pretend it was to deal with a plan subdivision or an implement consent application, and there was a fundamental concern about drainage and the appropriateness of site servicing or the configuration of the lot to deal with proper positioning of buildings and overland drainage and how to deal with stormwater. We would be saying that the application, the appropriate information hasn't been demonstrated that the property could be properly serviced. And on that basis, we would be denying the application. And yes, they would have the right of appeal, and our engineering group would be then called upon to provide evidence as to why the information would be deficient or incorrect in its accounting, and they would have to counter respond. And the board, based on all the information, would have to decide whether the lot, by size and configuration, is appropriate for the intended use based upon those broader issues and matters.
Thank you. So, just to be clear, we will have to know exactly where each file is at. And a lot of times over the last few years, when I've had complaints, CEO McNeely, we found out it's been from the applicant that it's been held up. So I think that keeping really thorough documentation of the exact phasing of the process will probably stand to back us better than the others. For we have in most cases found out the stuff has been sitting at the applicants or their representatives. So yes, it's going to put strains on us, but if we keep doing the job we're doing, I don't see we'll have too much trouble. Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Reading through that, it's funny, it's quite a report, but it's extremely vague on details because they haven't come out with all the details. But the things that are glaring are things that you mentioned, like timelines with applicants. What happens if an applicant doesn't submit the proper paperwork, drags it on, knowing that they can do that with this, and it's going to put strain on us as a township to get these things done. They're going to know that. I'm afraid things are going to be rushed through. Things aren't going to be thought thoroughly, and because we're going to have to meet these timelines. And the other concern is the limiting the conditions that municipalities can put on a draft plan. So does this mean now we're going to have these packed subdivision with these smaller streets and no parklands or very minimal parklands? Like, I don't know where these limits are going to end because they haven't given us these limits. But it's kind of like the dark ages of development, where now it's going to be the developer that comes in, saying, yeah, we have the government behind us 100%. So they basically, we can do what we want with the subdivision. This is going completely against everything that we talked about even last week about trying to save our town. This is a about face to us losing our town, because if we have no control over it and the government's telling us what to do, why are we here? Like, just do it then.
So, Madam Mayor, through Councillor Austin, you are correct. Aspects of the legislation are vague. In other words, the legislation provided the ability for the minister at a future date regulations to incorporate some elements of specificity. Focusing exclusively on your comments about province centralizing comments as to what could be framed as conditions to draft approval on planned subdivision. Unfortunately, every property is unique unto itself. And if you have to have standardized conditions or elements that municipalities can provide comment on, you do lose the uniqueness of the property, its setting within the community, and it does frustrate the ability of council and members of the public to participate in a meaningful way. Obviously, today, the province has not exercised that ability, but the legislation allows the minister to establish regulations on a future date, which could create some elements of standardization in subdivisions. I can tell you that subdivisions across here approved over the last 4 or 5 years. About half the conditions are tailored specifically to the property in which resides, and comments that township has received from members of the community and government agencies, and they were crafted to deal with those specific developments and the settings in which they reside. I don't believe that centralized planning is the answer. I don't think you can create policies and or conditions that reflect each and every property. What happens in Toronto is different than what will happen here and there, which will be different than what happens to the city of Waterloo. And that's just the reality of planning and why we have public consultation, why we have official plans, and why we have public meetings and consultation with our neighbors.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Roman.
Madam Mayor, additional question I had for the CAO was in regards to parkland. I noticed in the report there there's some discussion about parkland changing. So are we in a situation where in the future a subdivision can just give us parkland that basically a swamp and we have to accept that as parkland, or what sort of negotiation will be taking place in the future?
So Madam Mayor, through to Councilor Rowland. In the report, the area that I spoke to related to parkland dealt with two different settings. One was under community benefits. And once upon a long time ago, prior to this past government, it was called heightened density provisions. And so you were able to negotiate bonuses if additional height or density was given to a development and with community benefits. They would vary from location to location. Province, in recent legislation, tightened up those aspects and captured within that pricing of land for park space and the calculation of park space in combination with development charges and what these negotiated community benefits. We do not, in North Dumfries, exercise the community benefits model. Some of our urban counterparts in Waterloo region do. So that aspect we're not affected by. The other area was to deal with designated transit corridors or stations. Once again, we don't have those scenarios here in North Dumfries, but the minister could identify and encumbered properties along these key corridors and require us to include them as part of the parkland dedication. Yet they may not necessarily be ideal by their location and or their configuration. So that's why we put it in the report, just because, you know, we are part of Waterloo region that could be in the future on our urban counterparts may be affected by this. And it's important for council to understand that there may be situations where there could be limited parkland across the Waterloo region, specifically in urban centers. And by inference, that does affect us all. It goes to our quality of life as a broader community, and perhaps a need for other placement elsewhere in the region to meet the demands of urgent growth.
Councillor Austin has got a legacy hand.
I was just going to actually respond to,
Okay,
Andrew's
Margaret
comment.
was next. I'll let you go, Margaret, go ahead.
Sorry?
Margaret will go and then you.
A question again for C, or really through the mayor. One thing that's happening here is site plan approvals will no longer come to council for approval. They will be approved by staff. So what problem does the provincial government feel that they're dealing with there? Why do they feel that that is necessary?
I can't speak for the province itself. Reading between the lines, my expectation is that they did this because they saw it mainly as technical implementation nature, and that by removing the council decision-making process would reduce the time it takes to get reports through the cycle and a decision made. So in the context locally here, we are reworking our site plan process in recognition of the requirements of the legislation. And so we're looking at two different aspects to bring both public as well as council into the process, albeit not the decision-making formula. So today, it has not been our practice to have signage posted at the property frontage where a site plan application is being filed. So under our amended process, there would be a requirement for a sign at the property frontage advertising that a file has been submitted, how to contact township staff to seek more information with a brief summary of what is being proposed at that address. The second is to pre-circulate when we notify agencies of the proposed application, seek their comment, to provide a briefing paper to members of council, so that members of council are aware of the nature of the proposal. And you can provide your comments if you have any on the nature of the proposal, which could be then reflected through the site plan review process, and where appropriate, incorporated into what will be the final decision as to the merits of the site plan and any elements incorporated into the site plan.
So council then is gonna have an opportunity to comment on it. It's just that the formal approval by council and at the end of the process isn't gonna be needed anymore.
Right, so the way the legislation has been established, council no longer has the ability to make a decision. Council by legislation is to delegate to a staff member.
Thank you.
Councillor Austin, the reason I didn't recognize your hand was while CEO and Celia was talking, you had your hand up, and Councillor Bowman was talking, and while he was talking, my query put her hand up, and yours was still up, so I assumed it was a legacy hand, which it was until you heard, as you said, you heard CEO make his comment. So you're up now, please.
Yes, thank you. I wasn't quite finished my question. I wanted to respond to. So I had a question when you were talking about uniqueness of properties and draft plans and stuff like that. So hypothetically, if somebody came in and owned 50 acres, excuse me, 50 acres of land right beside a main artery into Ayr or any other town in North Dumfries and wanted to develop it, instead of doing a development where they pack as many houses in, if you have 50 acres and you want to do, let's say, 50 lots of 1 acre homes, would that be allowed under these rules?
So the changes that were brought forward under Bill 109 don't speak to density or range or mix of housing. So the historic documentation, like the provincial policy statement, growth plan for the greater Golden Horseshoe area still applied, and as does the regional and township official plan. And it's in those documents that we identify where we wish growth to be accommodated and on what basis or what terms. All this Bill 109 is designed to do is to try and accelerate the review timeline so that approvals process doesn't drag on indefinitely. The province believes that one reason for higher cost of housing is the amount of red tape, length of time to come to a decision, and the argument being the longer it takes time, the higher the cost is to the developer, and that cost obviously then is passed on to the owners. So in no way does Bill 109 self-speak to density or where growth goes. Those existing documents still are in place. I have expectations coming out of the Affordability Housing Task Force report, which was commissioned by the province, and their documents released in February of this year. I believe you'll start to see new legislation coming from the province of Ontario in the next few weeks. Those elements may require us to go back and revisit our official plan and or zoning bylaws. And there could be in those documents specific language that talks to development as a right. Elements where maybe they're tailing of public participation and consultation, removing restrictions such as assessing the character of neighborhoods. Those were all key elements that were in that recommendation report from February. If those elements do come forward in some form or fashion, then yes, that is where you would see a provincial reach, where it would curb the ability of local councils to harm the process.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The last question I have for the CEO is earlier on in the report you talked about in February, one of the areas they were looking at was heritage. So I guess on behalf of the Heritage Committee, I guess I'm wondering what strength is left of the Heritage Act. I know there was some discussion about if a heritage property was to hinder in any way development, the Heritage Act could be overturned for that particular property. I'm wondering, are they moving forward with any of those recommendations?
So far, we obviously haven't seen the next shoe and how it may drop. So it would be pure speculation on my part. What I believe the Affordable Housing Task Force was trying to report was that there have been instruments that have been used to try and frustrate or delay development proposals. I don't think they were speaking about existing designated properties. I think what they, I'm going from memory, I believe the February report talked about where municipalities were rushing after a development application had come forward to advance a property to a Part 4 designation. So I just want to make that distinguishing element. But certainly there were aspects in the February report that talked about a certain number of dwelling units per lot, regardless of their size, being permitted as of right. There was direction or recommendations related to a certain massing in terms of height of buildings. I believe 4 stories was flagged. I believe there was recommendations related to municipalities should not, as part of intensification or redevelopment, focus on character of neighborhood. You know, we talk sometimes about rhythm of the street, and we look at, you know, trying to maintain certain setbacks, especially if they're very unique in a certain neighborhood, cultural landscapes and the like. There seemed to be a direction signal to the province that these are all encumbrances to consideration of housing and housing attainability from a financial perspective. And we'll have to see whether or not this government, newly elected on June 2nd, will bring forward one or more of the recommendations, and what meaningful consultation will occur as part of that next legislative round.
Thank you, CEO McNeely. So basically, this is a frightening bill for a lot of us. We have grave concerns. Do we have any recourse at this time?
So Bill 109 is been adopted. It was introduced at the very, very end of March and was claimed middle of April. And some aspects came into effect on that day of proclamation. Others, like the site plan, come into effect on July 1. And fee structure for penalties for not processing applications within the prescribed timelines comes into effect January 1 of 2023. So Bill 109, as we know it, is in effect. I know that AMO continues to try and work with the government about January 1st implementation, and specifically the clawback of funds for applications that don't meet certain prescribed deadlines. But I think our effort really will need to be focused on what next does the government bring forward. Our understanding that the government is going to have a summer session. We have the Honorable Steve Clark returning as the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So there won't be a phase-in period for him to learn the ministry. It's been there for 4 years. So I anticipate that we'll see some legislation coming out of the government very quickly. Certainly in the lead up to the June 2nd election, housing affordability, need for additional housing from a supply perspective is front and center by all 3 of the main parties. Certainly was front and center as part of Premier Ford's statements. And I think you're going to see the government, in some form or fashion, roll out documents this summer as they try and tackle this key agenda.
But even as they roll them out, we can still stress to them that we have concerns and we have justifiable reasons on why we want to maintain Ontario as a certain province, as a certain lifestyle. And we do not want that lifestyle to be hindered to the extent or the detriment of the peoples or the communities.
So, Madam Mayor, yes, I would hope that council will be engaged. I hope that council, in partnership with other area municipalities within Waterloo region and through AMO, will raise matters of concern as we start to work our way through that pending legislation. I do think there are opportunities to improve the development, review, and decision-making process. But I'm more of needs a scalpel in places, does not need a sledgehammer. And I think we also recognize that it is a partnership. It starts with clear provincial legislation that's fair and balanced. It's working with a cooperative development community, but it also requires us in terms of making sure our processes are focused and we're keeping our message, and that our commenting agencies are able to turn around documents in a fair and reasonable time so that council can make full decisions based on complete information.
Thank you. Do we have a meeting with the Minister of Natural Resources? Have we requested one? Not Natural Resources, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So as part of the AMO delegations, we do have a meeting delegation with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. It was to deal with affordable housing. It's a joint delegation with our partners, Wilmot, Woolwich, and Wellesley Townships. If we're successful, there's nothing to stop us from leaving other leave behind briefing documents. But obviously, at this point in time, we haven't seen further legislation. Cabinet was just sworn in on Friday, and we do not have a date yet when the summer sitting of the legislature will resume.
Thank you, Chair Mary. So we can have something to take with us to AMO should we be fortunate enough to meet with the Minister. Should we not get the meeting with the Minister, we would still like to send something to Municipal Affairs and Housing in regards to this issue, and Council so agrees. Can I have a motion now, please?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rowland, that PD report number 30-2022 be received, and that council delegate the approval authority for site plan approvals issued under section 41 of the Planning Act to the Chief Administrative Officer effective June 30th, 2022, and that staff prepare an amendment to the official plan with the convening of the statutory public meeting at the August 8th, 2022 meeting to add site plan review and agreement process into the formalized pre-consultation process as contemplated in the Planning Act.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Next, we have report number BLDG 03-2022, Highline Variance Request for 3184 Alps Road. Is there any questions or comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Rollman, that building report 03-2022 be received and a council grant a sign variance under bylaw 2491-12 for 3184 Elks Road to allow for a second pylon sign with an increased height of 9.08 meters or 29.8 feet from the permitted 7.5 or 24.6 feet to be installed along the Alps Road frontage.
All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next, we have communications. Councillor Norman, you do not have to read it in its entirety. Is there anyone that wants to pull an item? Councillor McCreary.
11.1.10.
Councillor Gillespie.
11.1.17.
Are there any others? Councillor McCreary, do you have your hand up again, or is it legacy?
Legacy.
Thank you. Okay, so we will start with 11.1.10. City of Cambridge regarding Ontario must build it right the first time.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Foxton. I would like council to consider supporting this resolution by the City of Cambridge. It has to deal with fighting climate change. So on behalf of the Planning and Sustainable Development Committee, I'd like to put forward a motion that North Dumfries Council support this. A similar motion has already been supported by Woolwich, the City of Kitchener, and the City of Waterloo, as well as the City of Cambridge. And what this is in regard to is the building code. In order for us to actually complete the process of transform Waterloo Region Action Plan, we need to deal with the emissions created by buildings. The goal is for new buildings to be net zero or be able to transition to net zero. In order to do that, we're going to need changes to the building code. And the National Building Code, which is a guideline for the provincial building codes, does have items in it that deal with creating net zero buildings. The province of Ontario is now looking at updating its building code, but it has not yet incorporated the climate change net zero items into its draft building code. So this resolution is requesting that the province look at incorporating those items into the draft building code so that we can deal properly with climate change. So I am asking that council support this motion put forward by, or this resolution by the City of Cambridge. So the motion would be that the Council for North Dumfries support the City of Cambridge resolution, Ontario must build it right the first time, and that this resolution be provided to the Ministry of Provincial Affairs and Housing and to all Ontario municipalities. So, does anyone have any questions, or could I have a seconder?
We'll just have to wait until Ms. Sage gets the motion up and ready to go.
Which resolution is it we're talking about, Councilor Perry?
It's actually 11.1.10. I believe the City of Waterloo also was in there on corresponding on it as well. I think they originally.
The
Thank you,
City of
madam.
Kitchener has one of these resolutions, it's 11.1.7. And 11.1.5 is the Township of Lanark Highlands supporting the City of Waterloo on its
That's where I was
resolution.
confused.
I'm printing it right now.
Councilwoman, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I was wondering if staff could provide some clarification on this. When reading it over, it appears to me that the emphasis on new builds as opposed to preserving heritage buildings. So I'm concerned that there'll be a big push on tearing down old buildings and then building it right the first time with new buildings. So where does this leave heritage? Because right now, we look at it, if you retrofit a heritage building, you're actually saving all that from going to landfill. So I think that's actually in a lot of ways more environmentally friendly than building a brand new building in some cases. So I'm just wondering, does this address heritage retrofits in any way?
Or can we tweak the motion to make sure it does deal with that? Councilor McCreary, can you read it again to us, please?
Want me to read the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. That the Township Council support the resolution from the City of Cambridge regarding Ontario must build it right the first time, and that this motion be forwarded to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and all municipalities in Ontario. So this is regarding new builds.
Yes.
It's not dealing with heritage building.
So it should be fine then. Councilwoman, are you okay with that? All right, so can I have a seconder, please, for the motion? Oh, Councilor Austin, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can we not add a heritage feature into the resolution? And just like add and that heritage buildings be taken into consideration?
Motions for only for new builds. So it wouldn't be a heritage, doesn't touch it.
Also, it doesn't, okay, so it
Only
won't
for new
pertain.
builds.
Okay.
Is that correct, right? Councilor McCreary, correct, right? New builds only.
Yes, that's what I believe, yeah.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councilor Gillespie seconds the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Next, we have 11.1.17 correspondence regarding notification of the local authority. Councilman Gillespie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wondered, I have not heard of this. It's to grow cannabis, I believe, at the Cambridge Garden Center by the looks of it. And I just wondered if you had notice of this before, or do the neighbors? I'm a little concerned about the neighborhood not knowing about this, and
CO McNary.
So Madam Mayor, through Councilor Gillespie, yes, in late 2020, we were notified that they were going to be licensed to the federal government. They did not file their paperwork within the window of time that was established by Health Canada. And so they're notifying us that they are resubmitting their package back to Health Canada to identify themselves as candidate sites for the growing, cultivation, packaging of medicinal cannabis products.
so will the neighborhood be notified of this at all?
So there is no formal process through the Health Canada licensing process of that.
Really?
The township wishes to make them aware of it, but there is no formal process through federal regulations. We do include this in council packages so that it is recorded, but there is no process.
I'm just really concerned about,
They're just coming.
you know, how they build this thing so that there's filters for smell and light and things like that. How can we control that?
I don't believe they
So
are.
there are some elements within the building code. There are some elements under the farm code as it relates to exhausting agricultural products. Cannabis falls under. Those are not as
Status.
rigid as we would normally see for an industrial facility.
No, if you scroll down into the discussion items, there were two separate meetings.
Relates to scrubbers and similar. That's been what the issue has been across the rural countryside, in Canada.
Yeah,
Where
no,
there's,
they haven't
especially
been
where
the
there's been a
council.
significant clustering
It's a different.
of facilities.
Did we not look into putting in a bylaw for cardinals at one
Oh, I
time?
see.
Yes, we have undertaken some research. We were heavily
Yeah,
leaning
two
on
separate
documents coming out of Leamington because there's been significant clustering. There were court challenges to their
The one from
bylaws,
2020.
and actually one of them related to light pollution. I apologize, light pollution. It was actually just resolved through a settlement in the last couple of weeks. So yes, it is staff's intent to bring forward those elements now that it's been through the courts and there's been testing. The powers were significantly curtailed through what the originally identified to what's now been.
So what options?
There are limited controls. With the light emissions. And as it relates to exhaust fumes from the treatment process itself. Now, the township does have other licensed facilities operating in the community. And so far, there has been no complaints. Staff have worked with those individuals. We've had cooperative landowners where they've advanced them, and they did go above and beyond in terms of what they had to do. I think they understood the benefits. I don't know specifically what lighting or exhaust processes are proposed at this site, but staff have in the past tried to work with the owner to elevate requirements.
there are several homes in this area, though maybe not as much as the one I know of is kind of up by itself, right? So that would be a concern.
Certainly, there is a clustering, a series of homes
That's right.
going up, Shelter, that would be very close proximity to this.
Even right across the road from Morrison, where it is on Morrison.
Yes, I guess east of the commercial building, would be yes.
I think eventually we should inform the residents that this is happening.
If council wishes notification given, then we can make people aware that a license has been applied for. Doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be approved, because they have to meet certain criteria from Health Canada. In terms of site suitability, the technology we deploy, site security, and the like. But they are notifying us as they're obligated that they're making resubmitting their application.
So CEO McNeely, what I hear from Council Gillespie is that she would like notification to the residents surrounding it. I would think that would be a fair notification for anyone in the township with a site going in near them. And would we have to create a bylaw for that? Or what would we
No,
need to do?
council just needs to provide direction to us. So, you know, is it 120 meters from the property boundary? Let people get notified. That's what our normal planning act application would be. If we're going to consider a rezoning or an official plan amendment. As council wish, same measurement apply for this bailout by first class mail.
I think that would be fair, but councillors, I'm looking towards you. Are you in favor of notifying residents within 120 meters of this type of facility? I see nods, yes. Do we, Councillor Austin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Given some of the locations in the township, can we not up it to like 250 or 500 meters? Because in some places, we might get 120 meters, well, you might only notify 6 people. Like when you get out into the rural areas. I mean, if it's on Northumberland Street with 120 meters, you're gonna hit a lot of people, but if you're out in Ward 4, Ward 3, and some of the more rural areas, you may only hit 3 farms.
CEO McNeely, do we know how far the odor potentially can travel?
I think it would depend on obviously the size of the facility, how many, what the density or the number of plants are. There's a whole series of factors that would dictate extent of the fumes to be exhausted. So no, I don't think there's a standard answer to that. Prevailing winds would apply. You know, where is it positioned on the property? Are there landforms on a property that might act as a divide so it doesn't smell and carry as far? There's a whole series of factors that vary from location to location.
But Councillor Austin makes a good point. I know that in other places such as Brant, the odor, I guess, traveled significantly. Would you consider doubling the distance, Councillor Austin, to 240?
That would be fine. I was just going to mention, for example, where I work at Frederick Street Mall, the Wonder Bread factory is over on Victoria, so that's quite a distance away from me, and we smell it. Same thing if you're down South Kitchener, Dare Cookie, you can smell it for a kilometer around. So, I mean, 240 would be a much better start than 120. I'm just concerned again about the rural areas where, we've heard in the past, we've had some people say, I wish I would have got notification. I knew nothing about this.
No,
Well, it's because you're 140 meters away.
Yes, so do we need any type of resolution? CEO McNeely,
No,
just
I
direction
have
us
the
down.
direction that related to this property at 1718 Morrison Road for medicinal cannabis production. Council wants the property owners within 240 meters of this location to be notified. So we'll send out this package, part of your agenda with a brief covering letter.
Thank you, but we also want to state that this is for no, if council just receives notification, we have no jurisdiction.
We'll provide a cover letter.
Perfect. Anybody disagree with that? Seeing none, then please proceed. And Council Roman, can you please do the motion for correspondence?
Moving myself, second by Councilor Curry, that council receive the correspondence.
All those in favor? Sorry, just giving you a chance to organize the motions here. Next are the minutes of the committees, economic development.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Osley, that council receive the following items. Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting minutes dated June the 2nd, or June the 3rd, 2020, and June the 1st, 2022. Leisure and Lifestyle Advisory Committee meeting minutes dated March 23rd, 2022, and May 18th, 2022. Planning and Sustainable Development Advisory Committee meeting minutes dated June 10th, 2021, and June 8th, 2022.
If there are any questions? All those in favor? That's carried, thank you. Can we have the external public agencies, Councilor Osley, please?
11.3.
Correct.
Okay. Moved by myself, second by Council Gillespie, that council receive the following items. Grand River Accessible Advisory Committee minutes dated April 28th, 2022, and May 26th, 2022.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried, thank you. And other business, Councilor Roman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This outstanding item, I guess, in my mind, from a couple of years ago, with regards to skate park. At that time, we were talking about perhaps having a grand opening, but I think that's now passed. We're not going to have a grand opening any longer. But council had discussed some sort of plaque, similar to the one that's located at the front of the NDCC here, or like the one I circulated today from Hawaii Park. I'm just wondering if staff could provide us with some options as to what sort of suitable plaque we could erect at the skate park.
CEO Mary or Christina, do we have funds? It's about approximately $3,000 to $5,000 that's for is that correct?
So what we can do is we can do a markup and get a costing estimate. We've estimated based on similar plaques that we've done for heritage properties in the last couple of years. So we have a general estimate, but we can actually send it out, pricing, and what the delivery timeline would be as well, manufacturing, and bring that to the July 11th council meeting. We did raise this back in July of 2021. So this would be the return item.
Thank you. So is that direction we want to give to staff? So do we need a motion or just direction to staff?
I have direction.
You are so directed. Thank you. Next is 13.1, discussion regarding CS 010 admin policy, hybrid council and committee meetings when a member of council may participate electronically. Who's taking this?
So Madam Mayor, maybe I can introduce it and then when we introduced the policy as a draft back in March, the council adopted it in April 2021. We indicated in the staff report after a few months of utilizing a hybrid setting, we would bring it back to council at the end of June, with the idea of, do we need to make any adjustments to the hybrid meeting program? Is it working and meeting your expectations? Does council actually wish to continue forward with hybrid meetings? And are there any, working on the premise, yes. Are there any adjustments you wish to make to the policy based on things that you've observed or the way meetings have unfolded? In the intervening period of time, there has been a question raised about one aspect of the policy, and that is when members of council can participate in a meeting in a remote setting. is very narrow range in which that can apply. And so that's why that specific item was flagged, but the intent was the whole policy. It's up for review and whether or not adjustments are warranted.
Councilors, any questions or comments? Councilor Austin?
I move to remove it.
Totally remove the policy, okay. Does it show a second to for the removal of the policy? There is no second on Councilor Austin's, that's defeated. Councilor Roman, you had your hand up.
Madam Mayor, so with regards to policy, I guess what Councilor Oster is saying is he doesn't want to have any hybrid meetings at all. So I guess what I was wondering, along a similar line, is if we're going to continue with hybrid meetings, then you should have the option as councilors to be able to have a certain number of times per year where we could zoom into the meeting or attend remotely. I know now we already have that in terms of if you have your way on business, or something to do with your personal business or your township business, you can attend remotely. But I was wondering if some sort of policy would be in place to allow us to have so many per year that wouldn't count as being absent from the meeting. Or if we're not going to allow that, then perhaps, as Councilor Oster suggested, we don't have the hybrid meetings at all.
I guess your motion is still on the floor, Councilor Austin. I don't really understand the justification for a hybrid meeting. Except that it gives some people public. But would we still be doing televised meetings or YouTube meetings?
So, Madam Mayor, if I interpreted Councillor Austin's motion, we would rescind this policy and convening of any meeting going forward would then be in person exclusive. The hybrid policy as currently crafted allows members of the public to choose whether they wish to attend in person or remote. My personal opinion is there are merits to maintaining a hybrid council meeting. I believe there are members of our community that maybe have a difficulty getting to our meetings at our times in which we hold them. We may have to arrange childcare or similar methods if they have care responsibilities. And or it's the travel time. They may only wish to speak to an item in isolation and allow them to connect in and out when their time is called on the roster for the meeting. So there is an element of convenience for our residents to be able to participate. And I think it broadens the democratic process. The other advantage of the hybrid system is we do have residents that continue to be concerned from a health and safety perspective about COVID still being in the community and coming out into an open setting. Room isn't full tonight, but tomorrow there will be a number of people in this room. And there will be some people that will be uncomfortable sitting shoulder to shoulder with others. It allows them to connect remote, have meaningful participation into the meeting setting, and being able to communicate their issues or items that they wish to raise with members of council. If the concern is policy 411, if I can, it's in your agenda package, but I'll read it. It says in-person participation shall be the default for members of council to allow for physical meeting and dialogue. Limited exceptions to in-person participation shall be permitted, including we have 3 different situations or scenarios. Traveling for official business, that may be township business or it may be personal business, recognizing that all members of council are time and have responsibilities outside of corporate mandate. Illness or infirmary, health and safety. So those are the 3 exemptions. Now, if I understood Councillor Rowland's comment was, is there a certain number of meetings The counselor may be able to exercise for personal reasons, whatever those personal reasons are, they're personal. It could be traveling on a vacation, it could be other commitments, and they're balancing a schedule that's tight. But if council wishes, maybe an option would be within that calendar year, X number of meetings can be connected remote that do not fall within the 3 items listed above, being the travel for business, illness or infirmary, and or health and safety. That might strike a middle ground. But I do believe there are merits. You can see tonight, there's an audience. But there are a number of people watching this live stream. And then, of course, there are people that will check our YouTube channel in the next few days and have that opportunity. If we move away from the hybrid, we will have some of that opportunity.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've had a lot of meetings pre-COVID where we've had similar situation. But I'm going to kind of clarify when I say remove it. I meant, or I would prefer to remove it from a council perspective. I still think that if somebody, if a resident wants to speak, they can do it via Zoom. I don't know if we have to have this, what we're seeing right now, where we're all on Zoom and this whole thing has to continue. But if somebody wants to attend via Zoom, then we could do that via that TV, or the one behind me, the screen. And the other thing is that we've always had it live streamed anyway. We've had our meetings, correct? Our meetings have all been live streamed.
No, only when the pandemic commenced did the township open up a YouTube channel, and
So we can keep that going.
council provides that direction. But persons when we live stream, they can't participate. Live streaming is just like watching the TV show.
Right. So is there a way to have it where it can simply be, an applicant can be zoomed in? Or do we have to have this whole, like looking at all of us on the screen?
So if you're going to allow two-way discussion, then the platform would be Zoom, and this is how we would communicate. Members of council don't have to be in this room to allow for that Zoom option. I mean, I'll use it as an example. Most of the council meetings that occurred in the previous 2-year period, I was in this room. Ashley was down the hall. Members of council, for the most part, are at your residences. I guess the question becomes, do you wish to maintain a hybrid option where people have the ability to choose whether they wish to come in person or participate through a two-way communication, visual, audio platform? And do you wish to relax the provision that requires council to be in attendance unless one of the 3 criteria as outlined in the policy are triggered?
Councillor Roman, you studied it, you were looking at possibly a set number. What number were you looking at?
Madam Mayor, I was thinking perhaps 3 non-consecutive meetings, like so not 3 in a row, but 3 throughout 1 calendar year. So I was considering.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say? Your hand was up.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. Just wanted to comment on what Councillor Austin was talking about. One of the limitations with this format for council is, as he says, like right now I'm looking at the screen. I'm not looking at you. I'm not looking at Councillor Austin. I'm not looking at the CEO. I'm staring at my screen. So I could be doing this from my office or from my home. So we're sort of losing a little bit of that collegial sort of feeling by staring at our screens. So if we're going to continue with a hybrid system like this, are there different types of programs available to us, as Councillor Austin was talking about, where we could just be around the horseshoe, talking with each other, having a camera positioned like a film is for live streaming, and if somebody wants to zoom in, could they not just zoom in on the screen, just them directly and not all of council? I think it's what Councilor Ross was talking about. Because he is correct, we are losing a little bit of that sort of sense of what council was before the pandemic. And staring at the screen is not really conducive to building any sort of camaraderie.
So, Madam Mayor, through Councilor Roman, yes, we could still use the Zoom platform to bring anyone, I'll use the word external to this room, if they have a specific question and there's a two-way dialogue required. And basically, when that aspect ends, the link is broken. But if you wish the live streaming then to continue, you have to invest in other cameras. And, you know, the question now becomes, depending on how we arrange the room, you know, is it a static camera that just has a still, say, canvas picture? Is it voice activated? So now you might have multiple cameras working from different angles. You know, it depends on how sophisticated you want to go.
I'm going to pick on Councilor McCreary and Councilor Gillespie. Do you guys have any thoughts? Councilor McCreary.
Thank you, Mayor Foxton. I like the policy as it currently is. I don't think there's any need to change it. As far as the configuration of this room goes, I'm sitting at the end of a long table, and it's very awkward. If I actually turn and look at my fellow councilors, it looks like I'm gazing up at the ceiling, like I'm now looking at everyone. So it would be nice if we could sit in more of a horseshoe type arrangement.
Thank you, Councilor Gillespie.
Yes, because I'm at the other end of the table. I feel the same way. It's very hard to get any back and forth going with people when you're looking at the screen. I would think, like, if we had 3 passes to, if we needed to zoom in at some particular time, I think if we want to keep the Zoom thing going, I think that's a good compromise, I would think.
Councilor McCreary, is that a legacy hand?
No, I'll make another comment. I do think that maybe having an option for councillors to zoom in might be helpful, because sometimes you want to be present for a very important vote, something that you really want to make sure you make your views known. And if something is taking you away, it's not a good thing. So maybe having that option of zooming in on a few occasions throughout the year would be very helpful.
Thank you. I just have one comment I get concerned about is we list the 3 of them, which is official business, illness, or health and safety. I get concerned if we limit it to 3 and there's a bad winter, and Ward 4 residents have to, or council have to travel in a bad winter, and they use up their 3 all at once. So they've already used a couple before. So I would like to leave it at a certain number with the stipulation that if it's a severe winter, that will be looked at by council.
So, Madam Mayor, if I understood what Councillor Rowland put forward, he was suggesting that the 3 opportunities for council that are already in the policy would be maintained. And that above and beyond that, a member of council could miss up to 3 council meetings and participate remotely, as long as they're not in a consecutive meeting fashion. That's how I interpret it. So if I use the example of a severe winter storm, that would fall under health and safety.
Yeah.
Okay. So
what do you mean by consecutive meeting fashion?
So we met on June 13th. We met tonight.
Oh, I see what you mean.
We meet tomorrow. You would not be able to have missed the 13th and tonight, as an example.
I thought you were talking about 2 meetings at once, because I've done that before. I've actually done 3
We're
orders.
talking about scheduled days when council or committees of council would be meeting. So if council has a comfort level, then what staff can do, and return back on July 11th, is a rework of policy 411 to provide some context. Council can then, so we'll show it as a track change. So council can see what the new language looks like. And then council can decide whether or not that has merit, whether further tweaking is required, or whether you wish to go forward with the policy period. But then at least you would have that information in front of you for July 11th.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me, and I think when I think about this 3 consecutive meeting thing again, what happens if, for example, we meet tonight, we meet again tomorrow night, and we call a special emergency meeting? And somebody's gone on holidays, or if you're gone for 8 days of holidays, you'd miss the Monday, the Tuesday, and the next Monday. That's 3 consecutive.
So, Madam Mayor, if I could through to Councillor, we have a different policy that runs in parallel with this, and it's the remuneration of for members of council. And council brought that in because they were trying to promote, for lack of a better term, attendance at meetings. Special meetings of council that are not part of the approved schedule, in other words, that were tuned in after the fact, don't count in terms of, I'll call penalizing in terms of missing meetings of council, because we try to the best of our abilities well in advance to articulate the meeting schedule. Typically it's presented in October, November of the year prior. We do from time to time introduce new meetings, but they don't count against that penalty of missing a meeting or similar, because we know that we've gone in for some specified reason, and it's not fair because members of council have responsibilities with business, travel, vacation, whatever the case may be. And it was agreed several years ago that wasn't a fair scenario to penalize members of council.
I see no more hands, so I guess staff is being directed to rework this with the addition of 3 meetings and come back to council
On July 11th.
on July 11th. Thank you. That correct,
Sorry.
everyone? Nobody? Oh, anyone?
Can I make one?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I just want to stress that when it is reworked, that if one of us are gone on holidays or prior to it, when we arrange these things, that there isn't something else that comes around the corner and says, no, you can't do that, or you can't do this. It's got to be open for councillors, because if we're taking time from our holidays to want to sit in on these meetings, we shouldn't be pushed away from it. We should be encouraged to do it.
So, you know, I haven't sat down with the clerk to actually craft exact language. So, but it would be basically personal day as identified by the member of council. So we're not going to judge why a member of council can't participate. That's up to that member of council. And it would be granted if it's 3 days, that's ultimately adopted by council. That's what the policy would be. So it gives flexibility for whatever the reason may be. It could be vacation, it could be because you're caring for somebody and you're just not able to attend. To that member, council will decide what that personal day is.
Sorry, I do have another quick question.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. We want to
Sure.
discuss this yet.
Yeah, sorry. So just for clarity, we get 3 days a year, or just as long as it's not at 3 consecutive meetings. So it could be a meeting in June, it could be a meeting in July, it could be a meeting in September and a meeting in October, as long as they're not 3 consecutive, or you limited it only to 3 days.
So what was suggested by Councilor Rowland was I'm gonna use the word personal days. 3 absences for personal reasons within a calendar year. They can't be consecutive meetings. That's what I heard was put out for discussion. Staff have not put forward any recommendation. That's what was discussed a moment ago.
Oh, just for clarity, so that's 3 meetings per year that the person can Zoom in.
Correct.
Okay, I want to make, no, we're not saying that it's just a way, it's that they can Zoom in. Okay, thank you.
Participate remote.
Correct. As well as the other 3s that fall under the original.
The other current provisions of policy 411 being traveling for official business, illness or infirmary, health and safety would continue to apply and would not count against the 3, I'll use the word personal days.
You clear? Clarification? Yeah. Okay, so we don't need a resolution, do we, right now? Because we're just directing staff to come back, right? So you don't have to kill yourself, Ashley.
Yeah, no direction's been given yet.
Okay. All right, thank you, councilors. Next up, we have 14.1, bylaws, and that is by Councilor Gillespie, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Rowland, and following bylaws be given a first and second reading. Bylaw number 3333-22 being the bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a development agreement between V3 Group Inc. and the township.
All those in favor? Carrie, thank you. And the third reading of the bylaw, please, Councilor Rowland.
Moved by myself and Councilor Curry, the following bylaw be taken as read a third time and finally passed. Bylaw number 333-22. The bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a development agreement between B3 Group Incorporated and the township.
All those in favor? Carrie, thank you. And next we have the confirmatory bylaw, please. Councilor Curry.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Ossner, the bylaw number 3334-22, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on June the 27th, 2022, be read a first, second, third time, and be finally passed, signed, and sealed by the mayor and clerk.
All those in favor? That's carried, thank you. And the adjournment, please, Councilor Gillespie.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Rowland, that whereas business before this regular council meeting has been completed at 8:21 p.m. and be it resolved that this meeting adjourns and meets again on June 28th at 7 p.m. for a public planning meeting.
All those in favor? That's carried, thank you. Are there any members of council who have any comments? Seeing none, is there any from the media?